My name is Thomas Ellery, though most people call me Tom. I'm 47 years old, and for most of my life, I lived by one principle: family first. That was the lesson my father carved into me long before I ever stepped foot into the offices of Ellery & Sons Logistics, the company he built with 2 calloused hands and a stubborn sense of purpose. He always said our business wasn't really about freight or inventory or contracts. It was about stewardship. You protect what you build, he'd say, and you protect who you build it for. He meant the family. I grew into that belief like a branch twisting around the trunk that holds it. By the time I was old enough to take over the company, I'd shaped my life around responsibility, sometimes too tightly, if I'm honest. People say I look like the kind of man who carries weight even when his hands are empty. Maybe it's the way my blonde hair has started fading at the temples, or the tired calm in my eyes. Or maybe it's that running a business while raising 2 generations of Ellerys has carved its history directly into my face. Most days start the same. I arrive at the warehouse just after dawn, when the morning light is still soft enough to paint everything with promise. The concrete floors smell faintly of machine oil, and last night's rain soaking through open loading bays. Forklifts rumble in the distance. Clipboard slaps echo off steel walls. I've spent decades in this place, long enough that the rhythm of it has become the metronome of my life. Steady, predictable, comforting. But lately comfort had been in short supply, because of Ethan, my nephew, 25, sharp when he wanted to be, careless when he didn't. He had my sister's charm and my brother-in-law's impulsiveness, a dangerous combination for a family business. For years I'd told myself he just needed guidance, a push, a chance to prove himself, move. And for years he took each chance I offered and turned it into a near disaster. Missed meetings, poorly negotiated contracts, small financial mistakes that I covered quietly so he wouldn't be embarrassed. Still, he had charisma, and sometimes that's enough to convince a man like me that potential is worth more than results. I blame myself for that. Ethan strutted through the warehouse most mornings like he owned the place. He didn't look like an Ellery dark hair, sharp jaw, restless eyes, but he moved like he expected doors to open without him needing to push. Some of the older staff tried to coach him, but he waved them off the way you'd shoo a fly. "Uncle Tom will handle it," he'd say. Sometimes he'd say it in front of me. I'd smile thinly and let it slide. But while Ethan walked loudly, his sister walked quietly. Grace, 22, soft-spoken, observant, always hovering on the edges of the room like she was trying to leave space for the rest of us. She had an intelligence that didn't advertise itself, sharp eyes that noticed everything, including the things her brother tried to hide. Blonde hair like mine, tied back most days. A natural calmness around her that reminded me of my mother. I'll admit it. For a long time, I underestimated her too. Grace would sit in the warehouse office after her college classes, studying at an empty desk while I worked through invoices. She'd ask a question here and there, small things. Why do we route through Chicago instead of Kansas City? Or, what happens if a vendor raises shipping costs mid-contract? The kind of question someone asks when they're building understanding brick by brick instead of trying to leap to the top floor. But she never asked for a position, never demanded recognition, never hinted that she wanted anything from me. In families like ours, the loud one gets attention. The quiet one learns to survive without it. I'll never forget the morning the balance finally shifted in my mind. Ethan had been assigned a simple task: oversee a shipment schedule update, routine, something a teenager with a computer could handle. But he didn't check the addresses, didn't verify the paperwork. 20 pallets, 20 ended up routed to the wrong distribution center. A mistake that cost us time, money, and reputation. When I confronted him, he laughed. Actually laughed. "It's just freight, Uncle. Relax." And then he walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of the warehouse with the hum of machinery filling the space he should have been occupying with remorse. I caught Grace watching from the office doorway. She didn't say anything, just folded her arms and lowered her eyes, like she didn't want me to see how embarrassed she was on his behalf. That was the first moment I wondered if I'd been pouring water into the wrong soil. But I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Responsibility has a way of blinding a man, especially responsibility tied to family. I kept telling myself Ethan was young, that mistakes were part of learning, that I had made plenty at his age too. Looking back, I see the denial clearly. I see how years of wanting him to succeed shaped the way I interpreted everything he did. I told myself stories that made his behavior easier to forgive. I defended him even when he wasn't around to hear it. My sister, his mother, used to say, "Tom, he just needs you. You're the only real father figure he's got." And every time she said it, something in my chest tightened, pride mixed with guilt. After my brother-in-law died when the kids were young, I stepped in without thinking. That's what family does. But sometimes helping someone too much is its own kind of harm. I didn't know it yet, but the illusion I'd been maintaining, this idea that Ethan would grow into the role I'd carved out for him, was about to shatter, and when it did, it would do so with a sentence that echoed louder than any mistake he'd ever made. "Uncle, you don't understand anything." But that comes later. For now, in the calm before the storm, I still believed I could guide him. Still believed he valued me. Still believed family loyalty alone could shape a man into someone worthy of carrying a legacy. If only it were that simple. I've always believed a person's character doesn't just appear one day. It forms slowly, shaped by what they're given, what they lose, and who steps in to fill the gaps. Ethan was no exception. I remember the day he was born. I was 19, fresh into my apprenticeship under my father, and overly proud of knowing how to tighten bolts on freight racks correctly. My sister, Claire, was the golden one back then. Sharp, stylish, expressive in ways I never learned to be. When she gave birth to Ethan, she looked both terrified and hopeful. She placed that tiny boy in my arms and whispered, "You're going to be important to him, Tom." I don't know how she knew, but she was right. Life hit her hard after that. Her husband Daniel died in a construction accident when Ethan was just 6. A week later, I remember standing outside her house, holding her as she cried, feeling her shake like the foundation of her world had cracked. She kept repeating, "He's too young, Tom. He needs someone to fill the spaces." I promised her I would, and promises mean something in my family. I became part uncle, part mentor, part placeholder father. I took Ethan to baseball games. I taught him how to drive. I showed him how to fix a blown fuse and how to tell the difference between courage and recklessness. He soaked up the attention kids do. But even then, there were hints of something else beneath the surface. A little arrogance, a little entitlement, a little belief that because life had taken something from him, the world owed him compensation. I think the first time I saw it clearly was when he was 12. I had taken him and Grace, 9 at the time, to a summer fair. They were supposed to share the tickets I bought for rides. Instead, Ethan marched ahead, used nearly all 20 tickets on himself, and returned with a shrug. "I figured Grace didn't care about rides," he said, not even glancing at her. Grace didn't complain. She never did. She looked at the tickets in her hand, 2, maybe 3, and quietly walked toward the carousel. At the time, I scolded Ethan lightly, told him to be fair, but I also bought more tickets. I see now how moments like that taught him that consequences were optional if I was there. Some lessons age like wine, his aged like rust. There were other moments etched in my memory, the kind you don't realize are warnings until years later. When he was 16, he lied about passing an important school project. When the truth came out, he blamed the teacher, then the grading system, then unrealistic standards. I talked to him about accountability. He nodded, apologized, and went right back to playing video games the moment I left. Grace, by contrast, would stay after school to help teachers clean up their classrooms. She would show up at my office with baked goods she'd made herself, placing them shyly on my desk without asking for praise. She loved learning. She loved understanding things deeply. I should have noticed sooner which one was shaping themselves into someone dependable. But I didn't. I kept believing Ethan would grow into his potential, if I just gave him enough chances. The truth? Giving without boundaries can turn love into fuel for entitlement. Looking back, the pivotal moment might have been the day Claire sat down with me in my office. Ethan had just turned 21. He'd been expelled from a local business program for failing half his classes. "He's struggling, Tom," she said. "He needs direction. He needs responsibility. Maybe bring him into the company. Give him something steady to hold on to." She was desperate, trying to save him from drifting, and I couldn't blame her. I wanted to believe structure, mentorship, and a place in the family business would be the anchor he needed. So I hired him. His first week he came in 3 hours late twice. His second week he misplaced an entire binder of client contacts. He shrugged through training sessions, cracked jokes during safety briefings, and dismissed any criticism with a casual smirk. "You worry too much, Uncle," he'd say. "I've got this." But there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments when he showed promise, when he spoke confidently to a vendor, when he helped organize a chaotic inventory list, when he asked questions about expansion ideas. He seemed smart, capable, even visionary in flashes. It was like tending a fire that sputtered constantly. You keep feeding it, believing it'll spark into something solid if you're just patient enough. I had no children of my own. I won't pretend that didn't play a role. Ethan felt like the closest thing I had to a son. I clung to that, maybe too tightly. Maybe in trying to fill the hole his father left, I created another. Grace never asked for anything. She never interrupted, never intruded. She sat quietly in the background of every family dinner, watching, listening, absorbing. Sometimes I would catch her studying Ethan not with envy, but with something like disappointment, as if she knew he was wasting chances she herself would never be offered. I should have seen it then. She wasn't the quiet one because she lacked confidence. She was quiet because she knew volume wasn't proof of worth. But at that stage of my life, Ethan's path felt like my responsibility, my redemption, my second chance to raise a good man. The irony is painful now, because everything would come to a crashing point the day he stood in my office, sunlight slanting across his smug expression, and uttered the sentence that cut deeper than he could possibly have understood. "Uncle, you don't understand anything." It wasn't the words alone. It was the certainty in his voice, the arrogance, the complete lack of gratitude. And it was what came before that sentence, the moment that turned disappointment into betrayal, a moment involving money, responsibility, and the collapse of everything I believed about him. That's where the real story begins. It started with a request, simple on the surface, ordinary even. But some betrayals come disguised as opportunities to be generous. It was a Thursday afternoon, late summer, when Ethan knocked on my office door. The warehouse hummed behind him, sunlight slanting across his shoulders. He walked in with that confident stride he wore like a tailored suit. "Uncle Tom," he said, closing the door behind him. "Got a minute?" I did. I always did for him. He took the chair across from me, spun it halfway sideways, elbows resting casually on the armrests as though this were a casual chat instead of what it would become. "I've been thinking," he began, "about expanding my role here. I want to take on something bigger, something that aligns with my direction." He said it like he was some prodigy waiting to be discovered. I stayed quiet, giving him space. He leaned forward. "I've got an opportunity, a partnership idea, new logistics tech automated tracking interface. A friend of mine's startup is offering early buyer stakes. If I invest now, I get triple returns in a year, maybe less." I exhaled slowly. "Ethan, tech startups are risky. You know that." He waved that off with a flick of his wrist. "Uncle, it's secure. Everyone's doing this type of integration. I could even link it to our system once it's stable, help modernize the business, make things seamless." He always knew the right buzzwords. Then came the line that stuck like a hook. "I just need a loan," he said lightly. "A small one, just 50,000. The number hit harder than the words. 50,000 wasn't pocket change. It wasn't a small anything. It was payroll buffer, fuel reserves, emergency capital, money that kept the entire company breathing if something went wrong. "Ethan," I said carefully, "I need to know more about this. Show me the paperwork, the business plan, the—" "Oh, come on," he cut in, smiling like he was humoring a stubborn child. "You're overthinking. You always do." Instant heat crawled up my neck. I pushed it down. "I'm not overthinking. I'm being responsible." He sat back, eyes narrowing. "You don't trust me?" Trust. The word twisted something inside me. It's not about trust. It's about due diligence. He sighed loudly, theatrically, like a teenager denied car keys. "Uncle Tom, please. I'm trying to do something for the family, for the business. Don't make this harder." I could have asked for time to think. I could have asked for proper documentation. I could have said no, and maybe everything would have unraveled differently. But I looked at him, the boy I'd helped raise, the boy who lost a father too soon, and my heart softened in that dangerous way hearts do when logic steps aside. "All right," I said, "I'll help you. But this is a loan, Ethan, and I expect complete honesty." His face lit up. "Of course. You won't regret it, Uncle, I promise." I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. The squandering. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Not from Ethan, from one of his friends, the sensible one, the one who'd survived high school with him and somehow grown into a responsible adult. Tom, he said awkwardly, I just thought you should know. Ethan's been spending a lot. Like, a lot. My stomach dropped. Spending what? Money. A big chunk of money. On parties, on gear, on... well, he's flashing it around. Flashing it. My fingers tightened around the phone. Heat prickled under my skin. What about the startup investment? Silence. Then, Tom, there is no startup. Not one that's taking investor loans anyway. He bought a gaming setup, a new watch. He rented a VIP section at Ember Lounge last night and told everyone he hit it big on a deal. He just burned through it. Burned through my 50,000. An electric, suffocating stillness pressed into my chest. Not anger, something colder, something sinking. Thank you, I managed. I'll handle it. When I hung up, my hands shook. Not violently, quietly, the way a man shakes when he realizes he's been fooling himself for years. The confrontation I called Ethan into my office the next morning. He arrived with sunglasses on, despite the dim interior, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and irresponsibility. You wanted to see me? He leaned in the doorway like the room was his. Close the door. He did, but casually, without respecting the tension already pooling in the air. I folded my hands on the desk. Ethan, where is the money? He blinked behind his sunglasses. What? The 50,000 I lent you. His expression barely shifted. A flicker, a twitch, then the smirk. Oh, that. That, I echoed. He shrugged and said, It's gone. I felt something in me crack. Gone? Yeah. I thought the startup thing was legit, but it wasn't, and, well, things happen. This wasn't things happen. He spent it. So what? It was a mistake. He took off his sunglasses and tossed them onto my chair. Uncle, come on, don't act dramatic. Dramatic. The word tasted sour. You lied to me, I said, voice quiet enough that anger wasn't the issue control was. I didn't lie, I just didn't explain everything. That's lying. He rolled his eyes. Oh God, you're so stuck in your old ways. You don't understand how things work now. Money flows. You use it to build your image, to get into the right circle. That's how people get ahead. By wasting money that isn't theirs. It's an investment in myself. It was my savings, Ethan. And you'll make more, he said, as if money sprouted from the floors of the warehouse. My chest tightened, my breath shortened. But the moment that sealed everything wasn't the lie, or the spending, or the arrogance. It was the sentence he delivered with a lazy, irritated finality. Uncle, you don't understand anything. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Something inside me froze. Then slowly, unbearably, it shattered. He looked at me like I was beneath him. Like I was some outdated relic he'd outgrown. Like the decades I'd spent protecting him, supporting him, believing in him, were laughable. I didn't speak for a long moment. I simply studied him, not the boy I raised, but the man he'd chosen to become. Unrecognizable, unrooted, ungrateful. And for the first time, painfully, clearly, I realized he didn't respect me. Not as an uncle, not as a mentor, not as a man. The illusion died right there between us. He shrugged again and said, Are we done? I've got plans tonight. Yes, I said quietly, we're done. And he walked out. Without apology, without remorse, without a trace of the boy I once believed he could be. What I didn't know then was that this moment, the arrogance, the dismissal, wasn't the breaking point yet, but it lit the fuse that would lead directly to it. People imagine that betrayal feels like an explosion, loud, violent, immediate. But in my experience, it feels quieter than that. More like a drop in air pressure, a subtle shift in gravity, a moment when the world goes just slightly off balance, and you realize you've been tilting for years without noticing. After Ethan walked out of my office that day, the silence he left behind was almost physical, heavy, dense, like dust settling after a demolition. I sat there for a long time, staring at the chair he'd lounged in, the spot on the desk where his sunglasses had rested. My pulse thudded in my ears. My hands sat still on the wood surface, palms flat, as if bracing myself against some internal quake. He had lied. He had squandered my money. He had dismissed me, and worst of all, he didn't care. I had spent years believing that beneath his immaturity, a good man waited patiently to emerge, that all he needed was time, guidance, support. But in that moment, the truth rose like a cold tide. There was no good man waiting. There was only the man he already was, and I had helped shape him. That thought hurt more than the money, more than the disrespect, more than the contempt in his voice. The days that followed, Ethan didn't avoid me. That was almost the worst part. He acted as if nothing had happened, as if $50,000 had not evaporated into flashy nights and ego and recklessness. As if calling me outdated, ignorant, irrelevant was just a casual aside. On Monday, he strutted into the warehouse wearing a new jacket leather, clearly expensive, greeting the staff with loud jokes. He slapped one guy on the back so hard the clipboard nearly flew out of his hands. "Happy Monday, boys, let's make some magic happen." He winked at me as he passed my office door. The wink. It nearly unmoored me. It was the wink of a man who believed he was untouchable. The staff began noticing things too, whispered comments, raised eyebrows. A delivery driver pulled me aside quietly. "Tom, I don't mean to pry, but your nephew, he's been showing up late, leaving early, making a bit of a scene some days. You okay with that?" I wasn't. But admitting that meant admitting I'd lost control of him, of the situation, of the legacy my father entrusted to me. So I said what people like me always say when the truth feels too heavy: "I'll take care of it." The public incident. The breaking point didn't come from the money or the lies. It came in the most humiliating way possible publicly. 2 weeks after the confrontation, we hosted a client appreciation event at the main warehouse. Nothing extravagant, some catered trays, rented tables, a few banners, a short speech from me thanking partners for years of trust and cooperation. Ethan arrived late, half an hour late, eyes glassy, smelling faintly of alcohol, though it wasn't even 4 p.m. He walked straight up to a group of vendors and started talking like he ran the company. "You guys know I'm the future of Ellery & Sons, right?" he said loudly. "Uncle's old school, but I'm going to modernize everything. Real expansion, real tech, real money." One vendor laughed politely, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Then Ethan clapped his hands and announced, "Drinks on me tonight. We're celebrating big changes." I stepped forward. "Ethan, a word. Now." He smirked, spreading his arms as if inviting applause. "See? That's my uncle, the warrior." My jaw tightened. Outside. He followed, amused, unbothered, as if he couldn't even imagine he was doing something wrong. When we reached a quiet corner behind the storage racks, I finally let the edge into my voice. "What are you doing?" "Networking," he said simply. "You're drunk. I'm social. You're embarrassing yourself. And the company." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Relax, Tom. Seriously, you take everything so personally." "I take our reputation seriously, Ethan." "You take yourself seriously," he shot back. "This whole old-fashioned empire, the speeches, the family values stuff, come on. Nobody buys that anymore. I'm trying to bring us into the future and you're clinging to the past." My throat tightened. "You're representing the Ellery name." He stepped closer, pointing a finger at my chest disrespectful, in a way that made something cold unfurl inside me. "You know what your problem is, Uncle. You think you're always right. You think just because you worked hard and followed rules, that's how everyone should be. But people like me, we get things done differently, we move faster. You're too slow to keep up. That's why you don't understand anything." There it was again. The sentence. Delivered like a verdict this time. A couple of employees rounded the corner then, and Ethan turned, throwing his arms wide. "Don't worry, everyone," he called out. "Uncle Tommy here is just overreacting, again." They exchanged looks. I felt my face flush with humiliation. He walked away with a swagger. I stood rooted to the concrete, watching the man I used to call my nephew dissolve into someone unrecognizable. The noise of the event continued behind me, but the world felt distant, muffled, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. My chest hurt. My breathing grew shallow, not from anger, from grief. It wasn't about money anymore, or discipline, or reputation. It was about losing the boy I once held on my shoulders at a summer fair, losing the trust I had invested in him, losing the belief that I could guide him into becoming a good man. I had failed him, and he blamed me for his failings, and I blamed myself. But that night, everything shifted. The night of reflection. I went home late, later than usual. The house felt too big, too quiet, too still. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the living room, staring at the shadowed outline of my father's portrait above the fireplace. He looked stern, even in paint. A man of principles. A man who carried burdens without letting them crush him. A man who believed legacies were earned, not handed out like favours. The shame of the day settled heavily in my stomach. I replayed everything. Every moment of Ethan's childhood. Every chance I gave him. Every mistake I excused. Every time I softened when I should have held firm. Every time I stepped in to save him from consequences. I realised something brutal. Maybe Ethan hadn't betrayed me. Maybe I had betrayed myself, for loving him blindly, for mistaking affection for responsibility, for confusing hope with denial. The clock ticked past midnight. Rain began tapping against the windows. I felt small, hurt, old. But somewhere between the guilt and the regret, a realization cut through the haze-sharp, merciless clarifying. If I didn't change something now, I would lose everything my father built. And Ethan had no intention of changing. I rubbed a hand across my face, the stubble scratching against my palm. My reflection in the dark window stared back-tired eyes, lined cheeks, blonde hair mussed from stress. For the first time in years, I didn't see a protective uncle. I didn't see a mentor. I saw a man who had allowed love to blind him, and I whispered something I had never allowed myself to think until that night. Ethan doesn't deserve this business. The words hung in the air like a secret breaking free. Then slowly another thought surfaced. Soft at first, but growing stronger with every passing second. But someone else does. Grace. Grace, who worked quietly. Grace who listened. Grace who respected me. Grace who respected the business. Grace who asked questions not to impress but to understand. Grace who showed integrity without needing praise for it. She had been paying attention all along, and I had been too blind to see it. But not anymore. That night, weighed down by pain but lifted by clarity, I made a decision that would redefine our entire family. A decision grounded in justice, not anger. A decision my father would have approved of. A decision that would finally set things right. Cynthia once told me that revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. That phrase came back to me the morning I walked into Ellery & Sons for the first time as its owner. I didn't make a grand entrance. I didn't alert the staff. I didn't march into Mike's office and slam down the paperwork. No. I slipped in quietly, like a ghost taking back the halls that once belonged to him. The front lobby buzzed with phones and printers. Reps hurried between desks with stacks of proposals. The morning sun sparkled on the floor-to-ceiling windows exactly the way it had when I was 10 years old. Tagging along behind my dad, mesmerized by the size of the building and the way Mike commanded it. Now it belonged to me. My palms tingled with nerves. Owning a company is far more terrifying than imagining owning it. But beneath the fear was something else, a steady thrum of certainty. I am meant to be here. The receptionist, a woman in her early 30s who looked both exhausted and overqualified, glanced up. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," I said, adjusting the cuff of my jacket. "I'm here for the senior leadership meeting." She typed for a moment, frowned, then shook her head. "I don't see you listed." "You will," I said gently. "Give it a minute." She looked confused, but before she could respond, the elevator dinged. Out stepped Alison, the HR director, sharp bob cut, sharper eyes, and the unshakable aura of someone who had cleaned up Mike's disasters for a decade. Her eyes landed on me. She froze. "Mr. Ellery," she whispered, as if she wasn't sure if I were real. "It's just Tom now," I said, "but Mr. Ellery will soon be correct again." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, it's true, isn't it? The acquisition." I nodded. She inhaled in a shaky breath, then whispered, "Thank God." That surprised me. I had expected wariness, confusion, maybe fear, but relief. Before I could ask why, she grabbed my wrist, not roughly, but urgently. "Come with me. You need to hear something before the meeting." Alison's office. She shut the door behind us, motioned for me to sit, and lowered her voice. "I've been looking for your contact information for months," she said. "Because things here, they've been getting bad, Tom. Really bad." Her words spilled out faster than I expected. Employees fired without severance for trivial mistakes. Sales teams threatened with pay cuts to motivate performance. Contractors unpaid for months. A rumour that Mike's personal debts were being funneled through company expenses. A pending lawsuit from a supplier Mike had insulted so viciously that half the legal department had considered quitting. And that's not even the worst of it, she finished. I leaned forward. What's the worst of it? Her expression tightened. He built a culture of fear. People are terrified of him. They cry in bathrooms, they stay late just so he won't accuse them of laziness. He humiliates managers during meetings. He once dropped a box of files on a new intern and told her, "If you're going to fail, fail quietly." My jaw clenched. I'd always known Mike was harsh, calculating, aggressive, cold. But this was cruelty for sport. Alison studied my face carefully. "You're not like him," she said. I swallowed. Never wanted to be. "Then you need to go into that meeting ready," she said. "The leadership team is exhausted, angry, and bracing for another one of his tirades. They have no idea it will be his last." For the first time that morning, I smiled. "It's time," I said quietly. "Please take me to the conference room." The meeting that changed everything I entered while the executives murmured among themselves, tension hanging like static in the air. They didn't notice me at first, not until Alison cleared her throat. "Everyone," she said. Who the hell is this?" Mike's voice exploded from the doorway behind me. He stormed in, eyes already narrowed in irritation, shoulders thrown back in that arrogant posture he'd perfected since his 20s. But when he recognized me, really recognized me, his face went slack. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Oh," I said lightly, "I'm just here for the meeting." His lip curled. "This is a closed meeting. You don't belong here. Get out." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. No one dared intervene. Mike was a tyrant, and tyrants didn't tolerate interruptions. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my briefcase and placed a bound set of documents on the table. The acquisition papers, the transfer of ownership authorization, the notarized signatures, every seal, every approval, every line. Mike stared at them as if they were radioactive. "What is that supposed to be?" he spat. The CFO, a woman named Brenda, stood up slowly and examined the documents. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. This is legitimate. This is a full transfer of controlling interest." She looked up at me. "Mr. Ellery, you're the majority owner." The room erupted in whispers. Mike's cheeks darkened. "You absolute snake," he snarled at me. "You went behind my back." "No," I said calmly. "You sold the rights, every share, every leverage point. You handed it all away because you couldn't see further than your own ego." "I built this company," he shouted. "No," I said, voice low but steady. "Dad built it. You exploited it. And now I'm taking it back." Silence. Deep, breathless silence. Mike lunged for the papers, but Brenda stepped between us. "You can't touch these," she snapped. "You're no longer authorized." "Authorized? Authorized?" he sputtered. "This is a joke. This has to be a—" "Mike," I said softly, "you're done." He froze. "Effective immediately," I added. "You're removed as CEO. Security is on the way to escort you out." Right on cue, 2 guards entered the conference room. Mike looked around at his team, searching for support, loyalty, anything. No one moved. Not one person. Because tyrants don't earn loyalty. They only rent obedience. And his lease had finally expired. He shot me one last look of pure venom. "This isn't over." "It is," I said. "It ended the moment you stopped remembering we were supposed to be brothers." Security guided him out. The door clicked shut. And for the first time in years, the room exhaled. Brenda turned to me. The CFO, who had weathered every storm, looked at me with a strange mix of hope and disbelief. "What now?" she asked. I looked at every face around the table, tired, cautious, wounded, waiting. "Now," I said, "and we rebuild, together." You would think that removing Mike from the company publicly, decisively, permanently, would feel like crossing the finish line. But life doesn't give you neat endings, not in business, not in family, and certainly not when the fallout of a decades-long betrayal is finally ripping open at the seams. Because after the conference room, after the board approval, after the stunned applause from employees who couldn't believe the tyrant was finally gone, I had to face the one thing I'd avoided my entire life. my mother. The house that held too many echoes. I hadn't been back to the family home in years, not since Dad's funeral, when Mike stood at the podium like a conquering king and I sat in the back row like a guest. But now, in the cool quiet of a November afternoon, I pulled into the driveway as the new owner of everything Dad had built. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown since the last time I let myself see it. The paint was peeling, the roof sagged a little, the once perfect hedges were untrimmed. At the front door my hand hesitated mid-air before I knocked. My mother opened it almost immediately, and she froze. Her hair had greyed. There were deeper lines around her mouth. She looked so much older than the last version of her I had kept in my memory, a version who always stood in Mike's corner, always believed his charm, always saw me as the quieter son, the one who would understand when she asked me to step aside. "Tom," she said in a small voice, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to say my name. "Hi, Mom. Is he with you?" she asked, fear flickering across her face. I knew who she meant. "No," I said gently, "he's not." She let out a breath that trembled at the edges. "Come in," she whispered, a conversation 20 years overdue. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where Mike once bragged about his first big deal, the same table where Dad told me to always stand tall, the same table where Mum insisted Mike needed more support because he was under such pressure. Now, the silence between us felt like an unlifted stone. She finally spoke. "I heard," she said, "about the company." "That surprises me," I said. "Mike doesn't seem like the type to share bad news." "He didn't," she replied. "Someone from the staff called me. They told me he'd been escorted out." There was no anger in her voice, no judgment, no disbelief, only weariness. She fiddled with the edge of a placemat. "I suppose," she murmured, "I always knew something like this would happen. He's always been—" She stopped, searching for the right word. "So much like his father. The temper, the pride." I waited, and finally she looked up at me. "Tom, I owe you an apology." My throat tightened. "It wasn't fair," she whispered. "I put so much pressure on you to keep the peace. Every time he lashed out, every time he belittled you, I told you to be the bigger person. I told myself you could handle it, and he couldn't." I closed my eyes. Every childhood memory replayed at once, Mike getting praise for every small achievement. Me told to let him have this one, Mike celebrated. Me softened. "I should have protected you too," she said, voice breaking. When I opened my eyes, tears shone in hers. "You didn't deserve any of it." My voice was hoarse when I finally responded. "I didn't want to take the company from him," I said. "I wanted to save it. And you." She reached across the table and took my hand with surprising strength. "Then save it," she said. "Save what's left of our family too, if you can." "I don't know if Mike will ever forgive me," I admitted. She squeezed my hand. "I'm not asking you to fix your brother. I'm asking you to finally live for yourself. One last door." I left the house with more closure than I expected. Soft, imperfect, but real. I didn't expect to see Mike again so soon. But as I walked toward my car, I saw him leaning against a tree across the street. Wrinkled shirt, unshaven, hands shaking with barely contained rage. He pushed off the tree the moment he saw me. "So it's true," he said, voice edged with disbelief. "You went to her first." "I needed to talk to her," I said. "This has hurt all of us." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think you're the hero in this story?" "No," I said. "I think I'm the one cleaning up the mess." His jaw tightened. For a moment I saw something behind his anger, a flicker of fear, maybe even regret. "Dad never loved me the way he loved you," he said suddenly. "I knew it. Everyone knew it." That hit me harder than his anger ever had. "Mike, save it." He stepped back, eyes blazing. "You think taking the company makes you the better son? Fine. Congratulations. You win." "I didn't want to win." "You're lying." "No," I said. "I'm finally doing what I should have done years ago." He stared at me as if trying to memorize the version of me he had always underestimated. "Enjoy your empire," he snapped. "Let's see how long you last without me." He turned and walked away. No dramatic gesture, no last threat, no plea, just absence. A hollow shape where a brother used to be. Rebuilding. The next months were a storm restructuring teams, cleaning up legal disasters, rebuilding trust, repairing the culture Mike had scorched. But I wasn't doing it alone. Alison, Brenda, the managers, the staff, they rose with me. Together we turned chaos into momentum. One morning, after another long night of drafting new policies, I stood in my father's old office, now mine. I touched the desk where he once sat, the window he once stared through, the legacy he once nurtured, and I whispered something I wished he could hear. I brought it home, Dad. The final lesson. Success didn't feel like revenge anymore. Revenge is sharp, fast, burning. This felt different. This felt like justice, like restoration, like reclaiming a birthright I'd been conditioned to surrender. Mike had taken so much from everyone around him. But he also showed me something. Power without integrity collapses. Arrogance without empathy crumbles. And you cannot build an empire on fear and expect it to last. I didn't ruin my brother. He ruined himself. I just lit the hallway so everyone could finally see it. Epilogue. The quiet victory. Sometimes I still think about him. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever call, if he'll ever face what he did, if he'll ever forgive me, or himself. But whether he does or not, I've already found my peace. The company is thriving, my team is thriving, I am thriving. And for the first time in my life, I'm not living in Mike's shadow. I'm standing in my own light.